From clattering steam giants to silent bullet trains and Maglevs brushing against airplane speeds, rail hasn't just evolved, it's transformed the way the world moves. In the early 1800s, steam locomotives transformed short horse-drawn wagonways into long steel routes, linking mines, factories, and growing cities. Early British engines like Locomotion No. 1 and Rocket reached 20 to 45 kilometers per hour. It was already faster, stronger, and more reliable than horses over long distances. These early trains introduced the idea of predictable industrial travel. But the real puzzle starts from here. Like, how did these slow, noisy, coal-burning machines end up shrinking entire countries and changing everyday life for millions? And here's where everything shifted, because steam didn't just move trains, it reorganized entire societies. We all know that locomotives could haul dozens of wagons loaded with coal, grain, steel, and passengers in almost any weather, turning multi-day journeys into predictable hours. That reliability allowed factories to grow bigger and farther from rivers, confident that raw materials and finished goods would arrive on schedule. So, by the late 19th century, express steam trains were already hitting 80 to 100 kilometers per hour, setting up the next evolution of the global race for speed. Yet, railways were no longer impressed by heavy hauling machines, and engineers didn't want to settle. They wanted something that could go before physics slammed the door shut. And this is where steam turned into a high-speed obsession. In the 1930s, railways in Britain, Germany, and the United States treated speed like a national contest. Designers reshaped locomotives with smooth, streamlined bodies to reduce drag and capture every extra bit of speed. Britain's LNER pushed harder than anyone. Its A3 and A4 Pacific locomotives were engineered for long, fast runs, and one of them, the Flying Scotsman, became the first steam engine officially recorded at 100 miles per hour in 1934. Then, just 4 years later, in 1938, another LNER machine, the A4 Mallard, hit 203 kilometers per hour during a controlled test run. That record still stands today. And no steam locomotive has ever gone faster. And talking about Mallard's 1938 record, it showed steam's absolute peak, but also its limits. The boilers were overstressed, maintenance was exhausting, and even top engineers admitted they were squeezing the last possible performance from aging technology. At the same time, electric and diesel-electric engines were proving they could accelerate faster, run cleaner, stay reliable longer, and operate with far fewer people, especially on busy European and American main lines. So if steam had just delivered its greatest victory, why did railways suddenly shift their money and their future toward electric wires and diesel tanks? Well, because numbers literally beat nostalgia. At that time, Italy's ETR 200 was already matching and even beating steam before World War II, touching 200 to 203 kilometers per hour and averaging 165 kilometers per hour on its Milan-Florence run. After the war, French electric tests pushed beyond 300 kilometers per hour, proving overhead wires had far more potential. They used diesel-electric fuel many times more efficiently, needed far less maintenance, and could be controlled in sets by one driver. As the 1960s arrived, they replaced steam across the US because the railroads realized speed and efficiency belonged to electric and diesel power. However, the tracks beneath them were still stuck in the 1800s with tight curves, shared freight traffic, and level crossings everywhere. On the other hand, Japan chose a different path. Rather than upgrading the old, they built something entirely new. In 1964, just before the Tokyo Olympics, the 515-kilometer Tokaido Shinkansen opened, slashing the Tokyo-Osaka trip from over 6 hours to just above 3. But what exactly did Japan redesign so radically that a train could safely cruise beyond 200 kilometers per hour every single day? Let's just say they threw the rulebook out. Instead of forcing speed onto old routes, Japan built a completely new standard gauge line with gentle curves, long viaducts, and tunnels that let trains stay fast without slowing for bends or road crossings. They banned the level crossings outright, signaling moved into the cab with automatic train control, and safety systems constantly guided the driver. The Zero Series trains ran at 210 kilometers per hour and proved something shocking: that high-speed travel wasn't just possible. It could be reliable, frequent, and almost perfectly on time. That combination of dedicated tracks, full-grade separation, advanced in-cab signaling, and electric multiple-unit trains became the turning point no one expected. It quietly set a new standard that the rest of the world began to follow. Now, even though Japan proved high-speed rail was possible, Europe faced a different problem since its cities were crowded, tracks were old, and the terrain was filled with hills, curves, and long tunnels. In the 1950s, French electric test runs reached 331 kilometers per hour between Bordeaux and Dax. The speed was so extreme that it began to strain the old rails, and that single result convinced engineers that Europe needed a completely new approach, which became quietly obvious to engineers. And turning that concept into an actual high-speed system required a very different kind of effort. So how did Europe jump from scattered test runs to a daily high-speed network that links capitals, crosses borders, and even dives under the sea? Well, France led with the TGV. In the early 1980s, new LGV lines connected Paris to Lyon and beyond, with regular speeds of 270 to 320 kilometers per hour, and test records that later hit 515 kilometers per hour. These lines avoided small towns, used long viaducts, and followed a simple rule: link major cities fast and let regional trains handle the rest. That same logic continued underwater as well. In 1994, Eurostar trains began using the Channel Tunnel to link London with Paris and Brussels in about 3 hours. Soon, Italy joined with Frecciarossa trains, which were capable of 360 to 400 kilometers per hour, but usually ran at 300 due to infrastructure limits. And this is the moment everything clicked into place. Because piece by piece, these projects quietly reshaped Europe until high-speed rail became a true competitor to short-haul flights. But wait, the story didn't end there. By the late 20th century, Europe and Japan were pouring money into brand new high-speed lines, but many countries were stuck with curvy, century-old routes where true bullet train speeds were impossible. Basically, rebuilding everything would cost billions. So engineers took a different route. Instead of forcing passengers to handle violent sideways forces in turns, why not make the train itself lean into the curve? Actually, tilting trains like Italy's Pendolino and the US Acela Express use sensors and active mechanisms to gently lean into curves, almost like a motorcycle, reducing the sideways force so they can run faster on the same old track. And with upgrades, many of them reach 200 to 240 kilometers per hour without building a brand new high-speed line, though signaling limits, freight traffic, and especially tight bends still cap how far tilt can go. Then comes the real leap. Maglev. Shanghai's commercial Maglev hits 431 kilometers per hour on its airport run, while Japan's superconducting Shinkansen has already reached 500 to 600 kilometers per hour in tests and is expected to connect Tokyo and Nagoya in about 40 minutes. And the best catch is, these systems need completely new, extremely expensive infrastructure, which is why Maglev sits at the cutting edge, rather than replacing conventional rail. Now, after all these breakthroughs, from steam legends to bullet trains to levitating Maglev, one doubt still remains. What do fast trains actually change in people's everyday lives? And that brings us to the bigger picture. Look, fast trains don't just move quickly, they change how entire countries live and function. These trains shift millions of travelers away from planes, cutting carbon emissions because rail uses far less energy per passenger. That's why many European and Chinese routes now prefer high-speed rail for 300 to 800 kilometer trips, where total travel time often matches flying. Economically, these lines pull cities closer together. People can live in smaller towns, commute to major hubs, and take same-day business trips that once needed overnight stays. Also, the areas near stations usually attract more investment and jobs, as long as governments support smaller communities too. And with new battery and hydrogen trains replacing diesel, the next step is cleaner travel, not just faster speeds. Now tell me, if money and visas weren't a problem, which train in this story would you ride first and why? Do you think your country should invest more in high-speed rail, or is it overrated next to planes and cars? Drop your answers in the comments. And if this video took you on a ride, go ahead, like, subscribe, and share before the algorithm forgets we exist.